Welcome back to B&B Movie Reviews. This week, we confront some difficult conversations, envision the dream with Arnold, and go in for an extraction for the second time. Stay right there. B&B Movie Reviews is coming up next.
You're all love.
Please tell me what your definition of love is. Because the last time I checked, people don't love people that look like us.
They painted a polluted picture. That Papa was a rolling stone, but trapped Papa in a cage and never allowing Papa to come home.
You better continue to sing life and serenade soul into your laughter. And I will continue to sing life into your melanin.
You know, I can't help but notice these strange comments you've been making about or to Jeremy that makes it seem like you're only saying these things because he's black. If I brought home a white guy, would it have been different? Or would you have called him your brother man too?
Do you honestly think that the powers that be would actually leave it to chance and allow us to decide who runs this country?
Changes 846 is the new anthology currently streaming on YouTube that examines the hard conversations behind closed doors that many people across this country have had or are currently having in the aftermath of George Floyd and many other slain unarmed black lives. So, Brad, this is a short film, not a short film, this is an anthology film that comprises of short films that basically kind of have this consistent theme.
It's like a collection of outbursts, right?
Yeah.
You know, you're getting like one conversation after another, and it's kind of rapid fire. You know, the movie's an hour and a half, and it moves.
It does.
And it's because those little shorts that you're talking about, I mean, they come in, they're hot, and then they're gone, and then repeat. And I found that to be kind of exhilarating.
What worked for you in this anthology film?
Well, I think the format worked well for me, very much so.
Yeah.
I think the format in a lot of ways is the star. I think the black and white photography is really nifty.
Yeah.
I think also some of the flourishes that they do with the cinematography, you know, there's a couple conversations there where the background drops out and we see, as you saw in that clip, just, you know, a couple
talking.
That's it, just them.
Yeah.
There's no escape from them in that moment.
Yeah.
And some of those characters really want to escape. You know, some of the characters are like itching to get out of those rooms, but the film traps them there.
Then that's what I like about it, because it kind of traps them and it forces them to confront some of these issues.
And traps you too.
Yeah, where it kind of forces you to have these conversations, even though you may be diametrically opposed to what someone else is saying, but that's the conversation that is happening, whether it's in person in our lives or even on social media. We talk about it all the time, where it's easy to kind of just, you know, be outraged or just kind of yell into a microphone, but can you have actual discourse and real agreements about certain things and kind of come to some type of understanding, kind of find a way to meet in the middle? And I think a lot of these short films are really exploring that with people who are on opposite sides and people who are dealing with the same things but may see things a little bit differently of how they approach it.
What I like about a movie like this is that you, the audience, become another party in the conversation. You don't have the ability to speak to them, but you have an ability to listen.
Yeah.
And naturally, you respond to what's being said and you take sides. And in several of the conversations, in my opinion, there's a person who is clearly speaking from a place of right, and there's a person clearly speaking from a place of wrong. And it becomes this little bit of practice for you to, you know, well, how would I engage in this chat? But then there are conversations in this movie that both sides make some really excellent points.
Really excellent points.
And it forces you to do a little more heavy lifting to figure out, well, where do you fall in this conversation?
Yeah, because you can agree with what one person is saying about this particular conversation, or you can agree with a little bit of what someone else might be saying. And it is more about the audience and who is who's watching this and how you are going to actually respond. I think the film does a great job of doing that, of really putting it back on to you, the viewer.
Well, it could have been a movie where you're invited into these conversations and you go, okay, I'm on Team X,
Yeah.
right? And then you get to the next one. Well, clearly Team X is keep going, keep going, keep going. And it can feel a little preachy. At no point does this feel preachy.
Yeah.
Because it starts to shift the types of conversations that you're having. And
It does.
it is very engaging. This is not a movie that you can watch passively. You have to get in those rooms and with those conversations.
And I like, we could talk a little bit about some of the visual and the filmmaking flourishes that they do. There's an aesthetic that they use as they transition from from one film to the next.
I think some of the flourishes really work, and I think some of the other flourishes communicate the limits of the budget. And there is a fly that is traveling through this movie, and I'm sure we all have different interpretations of what that metaphor could be. For me, that's like you're a fly on the wall, right?
Yeah.
And I felt like that just did not work. I think it didn't work for me as a metaphor, and honestly, it didn't work for me as a visual either.
I thought it was interesting to see that, because I didn't know how, because you want to see some type of connective tissue. And I thought that was an interesting way, and also keeping that theme as far as putting that back on the viewer for us kind of being a fly on the wall.
Yeah, I
into
can
these
appreciate that, but I don't
conversations.
know if I necessarily agree that you needed a visual clue to transition.
No, that's fair. That's fair. I think the one thing with that, I thought I would have seen it through each short as we transition from each short, but they kind of like drop it and bring it back.
Or build it to something. Like the visual, like the fly, its end is just kind of like, okay.
Yeah.
Kind of cute, I guess. I don't know.
What's your rating for this?
I really enjoyed it. We're the B&B show. We give things a B-. If we don't recommend it, we give it a B+. If we do recommend it, this movie is on YouTube right now. You could watch it today.
Yes.
It's a B+ for me.
Yeah.
I would encourage you to hit play on it.
Same. I was thoroughly engaged and enthralled by the conversations that were being had over the course of all of these short films, and it's a B+.
And I hope these conversations are continuing to happen. And if they're not happening around you, maybe take a note from this movie and start having some conversations.
Yeah, and start those conversations, So, those are our thoughts on Changes 846. You can currently watch that on YouTube. So when we return, we're going to take a look at the new Netflix docuseries on Arnold Schwarzenegger entitled Arnold. Stay right there.
Today's cancer research is tomorrow's victory. A victory that is there for the taking. Grab it.
Now that was a great halftime speech. Let's go win.
Don't give up. Don't ever give up. I sold myself on that stage.
Ladies and gentlemen, Arnold Schwarzenegger!
Thousands of people screaming, Arnold, Arnold, Arnold. And when you visualize something very clearly, you believe that you 100% can get there. There was a lot of things they had to learn, obstacles that they had to overcome. You can get an injury, then all your athletic stuff is over. But the only thing that no one can take from you is your mind.
Arnold Schwarzenegger terminated his box office competition.
I was looking for another challenge. Politics. Let's get to work.
Arnold Schwarzenegger chronicles his life and career from his childhood in Austria to his domination in the sport of bodybuilding to Hollywood action icon to his political aspirations as governor of California in the new Netflix documentary series Arnold. Bryan, I idolized Arnold Schwarzenegger as a kid.
Yeah, I think we all did.
He was the first person I idolized. The Terminator, Twins, Terminator 2, Predator, Red Heat, The Running Man. I obsessed over all of these films.
Yeah.
Was that the case for you?
Same. I mean, the 80s, those were like the seminal years, us growing up, as kids and wanting to see all those action movies of the 80s, Sly and Arnold going back and forth. You got Commando, you got Rambo.
Commando!
I know. So it's like, yeah, all those movies, and I remember even as a kid, like those were my first introduction as Arnold was through those early 80s movies. Like I said, Red Heat, I remember seeing in the theater.
Yeah, and the
Running
chemistry,
Man.
you know, like he spoke right to you out of the TV. Like he was such an inviting action figure.
Yeah.
You know, an action figure, you know, I was really into G.I. Joe at the time, you know, like, so it was everything that I wanted out of, you know, a superhero.
Yeah, and so coming into this documentary, getting to, I mean, and we kind of know, I mean, with him being such a huge celebrity, it's kind of hard to escape not knowing a little bit about his upbringing or a little bit of his past or his personal life.
Well, we know the beats, right?
We know the beats, yeah.
And it was interesting to go into this docuseries where it's broken up into 3 chapters, you know, his rise in the world of bodybuilding, coming out of Austria, then, you know, action movie man that we all know and love, and then the governor, right, or the governor. I found the first chapter to be the most interesting to me. I think his drive and the way that he tells the story of that drive is very telling on how he would then motivate himself to be an actor and then motivate himself to be a political figure.
It's interesting too, because that first episode I found to be the most intriguing, which coming into this documentary and I saw the 3 episodes, I was like, ooh, I want to see the actor because that's what I'm familiar with. And I wanted to, but seeing his rise as a bodybuilder, seeing his history as a child, like seeing the actor that he went to the theater to see, I think it was Red, I can't remember the man's name.
I'm blanking on Hercules.
Hercules, and you know, basically that changing the course of his life, going to that theater and seeing that movie and wanting, basically inspiring him to be a bodybuilder. And then some of the tragedy that he dealt with early in his life. And the thing I love about it is because we get current interviews with Arnold, and then seeing interviews with him back then when he was going through those tragedies, and then the way they cut to the current interviews and him reflecting back on how he may have handled that, I thought was extremely profound in seeing his emotional growth, just dealing with the grief of the tragedy that he dealt with.
Well, the first chapter is the most focused and the most aligned with his memory of himself, right? Like, it is the whole documentary is first person, and I think maybe to its detriment. But it's the most engaging when he's talking about how he, you know, went to the movies, saw that performance, I want to be that guy. How do I change my body to be that guy? How do I then take the success in bodybuilding and then do something beyond that? It's like, so you're so on his side in part 1. I think when you get to part 2 and part 3, and it's still so damn determined to just be Arnold's story, it brings in a few interviews from people like James Cameron and, you know, Linda Hamilton and
Sylvester
Jamie Lee Curtis, Sylvester Stallone, but they're barely in this movie. Like, you're big enough to get James Cameron in your documentary. James Cameron's not doing a lot of documentaries, right?
He's a busy guy right now.
They must have filmed a lot with James Cameron, and we get, what, 4 minutes, 8 minutes max over the course of this entire 3-part documentary. And I feel like you're robbed of outside perspectives, and it's a detriment to the documentary.
Yeah, I think because of that first episode, because it focuses on his rise in the bodybuilding career, it makes sense to focus just on him. But as you get into him as the movie star, the action star, and also his political aspirations as the governor, I would like to see a little bit more perspective from other people.
Yes, so it's disappointing in part 2 when you only get a little, you know, a blurb here and a blurb there from really cool people. You know, like when Danny DeVito comes in to talk about twins, like, oh, that's fun, but it feels like VH1. You know, it's not that in depth.
Behind the music.
Exactly. And not even like good behind the music. This is not Motley Crue's episode, right? Where it's like so epic, like, whoa. It's so Wikipedia basic in that second part. And if you're a fan at all of Arnold, you know all this stuff already. The tragedy happens when you go into part 3. And we're following his aspiration to become the governor and, you know, do right in the world. And then we also have to reckon with all these accusations, with the affair that he had, with the destruction of his marriage. And Arnold wants to be honest about some of those things, and he admits fault, but you really need some outside perspectives at that point. Like, I want to talk to his kids. I'm sure his kids didn't want to be put on camera.
No.
I'm sure his ex-wife Maria Shriver didn't want to be on camera.
Yeah.
But I felt like you needed something
that,
more.
Yeah, to get that perspective, and I agree, and I do feel even in that third episode that he definitely feels remorseful and regrets, and he's
definitely saying the right words to a point.
Yeah, he's acknowledging the mistakes that he has made in his life. I think it starts, for me, I noticed that in the second episode, which I wasn't expecting to get in the episode that was focusing on his career in acting and as a movie star. But there's something that kind of shifts and changes where he talks about coming into Hollywood from the 70s, transitioning into the 80s, because the action star wasn't really happening, it wasn't popping in the 70s, that, it started like when the world started to change in the 80s. There's a point in the documentary where he's like, America is back. And they started to show these clips of Ronald Reagan. Yeah. And it's just interesting to me to see how he views America through his lens.
Well, he's had so much success, right? He became a millionaire based on his idea of what the American dream is.
Yeah.
And it's something that you told me off mic. We were talking about this documentary, and we were talking about the film Flaming Hot.
Yes.
That's streaming on Hulu. We reviewed it last week. And I wasn't like in love with that movie, but the way that film looks at Ronald Reagan's America versus how Arnold Schwarzenegger looks at Ronald Reagan's America, very different.
Very different.
Which one do we live in?
Exactly, and that was, and I don't even know if that's a fault of his own. It's just like you said, it's just the way we perceive and his life upbringing and his experience. But it was just off-putting to me seeing how he was kind of, the way he romanticizes America, but the way he romanticizes that era of America.
Bryan, what Arnold, the documentary, is about the power of narrative.
Yeah.
Arnold Schwarzenegger had a story that he wanted to write, and he did it.
Yeah.
And as he's writing that story across his life, he's just, getting bolder and bolder and bolder, and he's reinforcing his beliefs and the power that he was able to contort and shape. Like, he built his narrative the way that he built his body, and he keeps going back to that. He says that at several points in this docuseries, and that's great for Arnold Schwarzenegger, and it shows that you can do a lot when you believe it, when you write that story and you follow your story.
Yeah.
But that's not the case for everybody.
No, it's not. It's not. I mean, he always comes back to this thing about, I envision, this is what my vision says.
Yeah.
And
yeah. He's ready to write his self-help book. He's got the secret right there.
He is. So ready for this doc.
So I had to watch it. I'm an Arnold Schwarzenegger maniac. It has problems.
Yeah.
It has problems. It's so long. It's full of so much BS. But you gotta watch it. It's on Netflix. B+.
Okay, I agree. Yeah, B+. I'm going B+. I enjoyed it.
It's got problems.
It's got a lot of problems, but
I don't think it does him any favors. I think he comes out looking a bit like a butthead.
Yeah, but we're Schwarzenegger fans. This is what we grew up with.
Which is the problem.
I know, this
Bryan.
is our nostalgia. Oh, okay. So yeah, those are our thoughts on Arnold. Take that as you will. So when we come back, we'll be reviewing the newest from Chris Hemsworth. Tyler Rake is back in Extraction 2. Stay right there.
Tyler Rake.
Every 2 minutes, a woman is diagnosed with breast cancer. With your help, we can end breast cancer. We are all stronger together.
Tyler Rake is back, shooting down helicopters as he extracts the family of a crime syndicate's boss from a Georgian prison in Netflix's latest action thriller, Extraction 2. Extraction 2, Brad.
Oh my goodness. I did not want to watch this movie.
Well, I know you weren't really a big fan of the first film.
I did not care.
I know we disagreed on that. I remember we reviewed that on our podcast back in the day.
But you're like, Brad, we got to do Extraction 2. It's huge on Netflix. I was like, fine.
So give me your thoughts. What do you think?
Look, I texted you when I started this movie, and some of the dialogue was really not working for me at the start of this film. And it took a long time for this movie to get going. And I had to remember what happened at the end of Extraction. Didn't he die? And I guess he died, but then they revive him in this. And I was like, okay, whatever. But there is a moment that clip is a part of.
Yes.
That might be the best action movie I've seen this decade.
Dude, it's pretty amazing.
I love John Wick Chapter 4.
Yes.
John Wick Chapter 4 is so much better than Extraction.
Yeah.
But that action scene in Extraction 2, I mean, it goes for it in a way that even the John Wick films don't go for.
It doesn't. And that's kind of like the highlight of what these movies kind of hang their hat on, is the fact that they do these, what they call oneers. They're shots that are
digitally stitched together.
Yeah, there's shots that are stitched together.
It's
but
a
it's
little
still
funky at times.
It's still impressive, though, because...
Well, because it's so nonstop.
Exactly. And from a technical aspect, I love seeing that, because the way they do this oneer, and this oneer is supposed to be 21 minutes long, and which I think the one in the first movie is like 12 minutes.
Yeah, I was like, did I just stumble into Alfred Hitchcock's Rope? What is happening?
I know, right? And let's see the third movie. Maybe the whole movie will be one shot. We don't
love it.
We don't
but there's
know.
like 400 extras over the course of that 21-minute sequence when they're going in to extract the mom and the children out of the Georgian prison. And, it starts so small, and then, they're working their way through the prison, and they encounter, a few thugs, some hand-to-hand combat, and then it breaks out into this prison riot. I was like sweating watching this scene.
It's intense. And going back to the technical aspect of that, I like seeing how these oneers are put together because of just the way the camera. I mean, you have everything from handheld to lockdown shots to cranes to zip lines and everything in between.
Yeah.
And it's
You're
just
is this a zip line? Did they put it onto a plane? It's going into cars. It's going onto trains. It's going above helicopters.
It's incredible. It's incredible. And I want to give a shout out to Sam Hargrave, who is the director. Now, he comes from the stunt world. He was a stunt coordinator on a lot of the Marvel movies and some of the John Wick movies, or at least with the company 8711 that he was a part of. And he would get a lot of praise from action directors on what they call stunt viz, which is basically when they do pre-viz of fight sequences or stunts, and he would get a lot of compliments about that. And then he got the opportunity to make these movies, which are the two movies, Extraction and Extraction 2, that he directed. So him coming from that background from the stunt world, you definitely see a lot of that on display, and he doesn't just how meticulous he is with the action.
Sell all the hits, right? And there are so many different types of hits that occur in that sequence, and the instruments that they are bringing into their combat. It feels a little video gamey at times. It feels, you pick up this gun, you pick up that gun, you pick up this shovel. But I'm a sucker for it, and by minute 11 of that 21-minute sequence, I thought this is a movie that every action fan has to see.
Yeah, I agree. I think so, definitely. It's interesting because watching that sequence and when it ends, my fear, and this may be true, is that the fact that, okay, does this movie peak here?
Yes, Bryan, it does. Your fear is true.
But there are some other action sequences that are really pretty good.
There are still good action sequences after the 21-minute oneer. None quite like that.
No.
And unfortunately for me, everything that's not an action scene is Dullsville.
And I want to talk a little bit about the story and the writing. Joe Russo, part of the Russo brothers, wrote and produced this movie. He also did The Gray Man, which him and his brother directed, and I think he wrote that.
Cherry as well.
I never saw Cherry.
Bad movies, Bryan.
Something about the Russo brothers and their writing that feels very generic. And
I love the Russo brothers as a filmmaking troupe.
Yes.
Like the two of them.
Yes.
And the way that they can get these projects made and the energy that they bring to these projects.
Mm-hmm.
I think that post the MCU, they've put out some stuff that has not connected with me really at all.
Okay.
And again, script-wise, everything outside of the action just falls really, really flat, sounds hokey, sounds off. The emotions, I don't really bother with.
I mean, to me, it feels like they just kind of fall back on traditional action tropes that we've seen over and over and over again. The whole thing with the teenage son. I mean, this is something. I mean, you kind of saw where that story was going. Now, to the actor's credit, I didn't like how that storyline was beginning to start with like his connection with his father, and then when he finds out what happens, and the rift that starts to happen when he gets extracted from the prison. But once he starts to feel the weight of some of the choices that he makes throughout the course of the film, I think his performance, he really starts to. I think he starts to sell that action trope that we see all the time, and it makes it a little bit more digestible for me.
I mean, look, I don't care about anything outside of the action.
Yeah.
But the action is so good that I have to say that this movie is worth it.
Yeah.
And not every movie has to be, as we've said in many review shows, not every movie has to be perfect for every second that it's on frame.
No, it doesn't have
that
to
if
be.
you get one sequence like you do in this movie, you have to celebrate it, and you have to celebrate the package that it was delivered in.
Absolutely.
And so for me, Extraction 2, I have to recommend it to people. You got to check this movie out.
Yeah.
Now, ultimately, because of its faults, will it rank higher than John Wick Chapter 4? No, because John Wick Chapter 4 does everything good.
Exactly, yeah. And that's the thing about these action movies. You can have it all. And this movie doesn't do it all. It does it with the action, but the story is lacking. And I want to give credit to Chris Hemsworth. I think he elevates the material more than what's actually on the page. And I know we talked about it a bit. You said, what's your rating?
Look, I know we have to go, recommend, B+, don't recommend B-. I have to recommend it. It's got to be a B+ because of that sequence.
Yeah, I think I'm going B+ as well. Highly recommend. It's on Netflix, so it's definitely worth your time.
What else are you doing today?
Exactly.
Watch Extraction 2.
Yeah, but before we go, you see the awards that are sitting here. We won a Communicator Award for our show B&B Movie Reviews, so in the category of entertainment. So I definitely want to thank our audience, the people who have been watching our show and who continue to watch. We are extremely appreciative of this award and for all of our viewers who watch on the channel and on YouTube as well.
It's no small thing.
It's not.
This was like a silly little idea that you had about a year ago.
I know.
I remember we were in San Diego at Comic-Con. You were like, hey, Brad, what if we did like a movie review show, Siskel and Ebert style? And I was like, yeah, okay, I'll show up. I'll talk to you about movies. And then you do it, and then you go, oh, are people actually watching?
Yeah.
That's wild.
I know.
And so to get recognition like this, I mean, it means a lot.
It does
mean a lot.
It does. And we are deeply honored. So thank you again. So, and let's go and recap the movies that we talked about today. The first, Arnold. We both gave that a B+. Extraction 2, we gave that a B+ as well. Both of those are on Netflix. And Changes, 846, we give that a B+, and that is currently streaming on YouTube. You can go check all 3 of these films out from the comfort of your own home. So, thank you for joining us on this latest episode of B&B Movie Reviews. Come be a part of the conversation. If you have questions or suggestions, feel free to email us at bnbmoviereviews@gmail.com. And with that, we will see you at the movies.